really the work of the last 2 months. I mean, we had our nice 3-year project to figure out where is down and where are our feet and get the feet on the ground. And so, and my further bit is that of our 4 projects, the only one who has been really looking at all of these dataspace details has been AD4GD. The rest of us, I'm not quite sure about BCUBED. Yeah. Okay. At least I can speak for FAIRICUBE, and I know usage is also not better. And from Quentin's look, BCUBED has also not really dug deeply into this.
See it's a different way.
So we just happily went on with our nice OGC standards and our knowledge. What do we need for the topic areas we were working on to get the data there and available? And then at EGU, this is why we need conferences like this. Yvette came fresh off the AD4GD meeting, and they did it. They managed to get the Eclipse Dataspace Connectors wrapped around the existing OGC services. And if they can do it, why can't we do it? And so, I mean, we did have quite a few beer in the process of discussing this and waving our hands. And by the end of the post-EGU weekend, we were agreed we will try this. And since then, we have been absolutely scrambling because, I mean, the other 3 projects have all sorts of services, APIs, goodies, stuff available. It's all not in this data space world. Can we wrap this? And I mean, what AD4GD had come up with about 2 months ago was a way of taking the existing stuff, wrapping it under the dataspace connectors with, I mean, the one thing we are missing in our world, and I mean, those of you who still remember the first Inspire architectures, there was this vertical yellow line in the small letters, there was DRM. And the people who really dug down realized this was digital rights management. And broad discussion, Andreas also, wait.
Someone remembers, so.
I remember that.
He's as old as I am.
Formal was official. It was never official.
No, but it was on the first official diagrams until it suddenly disappeared.
Yeah.
And I mean, for a while, people were talking about it, then people talked less and less, and then it was just gone. And next topic, please. And as we were discussing before, I mean, a lot of environmental data shall be open. There are European directives we must, but then there's the tricky bits. And if everything's subsurface, the moment you hit groundwater or soil, all the open data crumbles, and it is personal property. That is my property. You're not going to publish anything on that because that could damage my property rights. So we have that. We've got in biodiversity. You're all aware of the various sensitive species. We are not going to publish the location of the last nest of whatever that is. So we have this balance. Okay, so we do need it. We've been getting along nicely without it, but now that we had this opportunity, we said, okay, let's see how this works. It's been very interesting weeks. I managed to scare up all of our geeks and blindside them with the fact that look what the competition did. You're behind. Come on. And so they have spent the last weeks desperately trying to see what can they set up in what systems. We are getting pretty close. News hot off the press. I mean, yesterday evening, the last mail was, we have it deployed at several FAIRICUBE partners and something still isn't working. And the good news from this morning is something is working.
Yes.
And Raul will now tell you about.
Yeah. So, okay, so remember yesterday I was presenting the ecosystem based on EDC, so minimal viable data space based on EDC. So I will just go to the actual deployment that we have made here. Let me just go. Okay, so that's of course in general how the let's say the ecosystem looks between 2 participants, but obviously the idea and that what we have been trying to do is to increase this to many different participants in the data space. And our more or less scenario is like this, right? So we have something in the middle, which is the federated catalog, right? So there is only one federated catalog. We have also one node which is responsible for the authentication. This is because we are using DApps. I mentioned yesterday that we are using the EDC based on DApps at the moment. We will go to EDC later on, but sorry, DCP later on. But at the moment we use that, which is basically a key clock. And then we have now 5 instances, 5 participants in the data space that are still, some of them in the process, but more or less operational. So we have first, like the PSNC instance, we call it the consumer instance because that was the original name. We have the AD4GD instance, which is, we call it the provider instance. And then FAIRICUBE has the EOX instance. Then we have NILU, which is, I don't know if also is FAIRICUBE.
Yeah, that's a FAIRICUBE lead.
Yeah. So FAIRICUBE. And there is also something about a Rastaman instance.
Also via FAIRICUBE.
Also by a FAIRICUBE. Okay.
So I mean, EOX and Rastaman are our 2 technical partners. NILU is the lead. Stefan was most curious, so NILU started.
Okay.
And therefore we now have 3.
Yeah, and from BCUBED and users, we are trying to ingest their APIs,
Yes.
but not as a providers of the infrastructure, but we are trying to use GBIF APIs and encode it to the.
Yes, exactly. So obviously the idea here is you can deploy, I mean, a new participant is when they deploy their own connector.
Yeah.
But they can also use the existing connectors to publish, make accessible their resources via the data space, right? So that's the 2 possible scenario. What are the minimum requirements for a new participant? The minimum is to deploy the connector and the connector's database. That's the minimum. Okay, so this is in general only allowing you to use via the API the communication with other participants in the data space. Right? So there is no interface even. Of course, desirable, you need to have the dashboard. So then you have at least some user interface to navigate and explore the data space. So these are like the let's say the 3 main components. So you see here, this is the participant. You have here the dashboard, the connector, and then you have here the database. That's in general the most important things. Then if you want to consume data, if you want this data to be, of course, on your own premises, then you also need to have your own data stream and the consumer backend. So that's obviously that's not necessary. It's not obligatory. You could use, the shared data stream. Yes, the shared data stream that we have in AD4GD, which is a MinIO instance. So also possible. So the other participants from the data space can share the same data set. Okay, so that's possible. And as you see at the bottom, of course, we have other components. These are the ones that are like the most shared, like responsible is one entity. It can be the same entity, can be another entity, right? So this is the entity that is responsible to have the federated catalog, the DAPS service, that means in this case the key clock, and obviously in the other instances we also have a registration service I mentioned before. We don't have this in AD4GD scenario, but we have also another installation with registration service that is having our own implementation, at least from the user interface. So these are basically the steps to do the deployment of a new participant. We as PSNC, like, I told you before, we are basing this on, of course, the open source project EDC. There have been, of course, some extensions, improvements here and there. But at the end, we have Docker images. So PSNC prepared like a set of Docker images for new participants just to deploy them, right? So that's for example, we have the image for the connector, for the dashboard, for the database, the data sync, and the backend. So this is what you need. If you have the full node, then of course there are some configuration files like config maps for the connector, the dashboard, and the backend, which are included in an archive also that was prepared by PSNC. And then of course the participant needs to start checking the health check, right? That's just to make sure that everything is deployed properly. There are some examples how to use the connector via API. So we prepare Jupyter Notebook that is available in our GitLab and also in GitHub. And of course, PSNC then also need a few additional things to do. We need to add the connector that you deploy into the federated catalog so that other participants in the data space can also discover the offers in your connector, and also to add you into the identity provider, that means in our key clause, so that the connector is authorized to work with the other participants in the federated catalog. So these are like only on the PSNC side because we are managing this component. So that's pretty much what has to be done. As Kathy said, this was started 3 weeks ago, the idea. Then we needed to allocate resources, people to actually do the things. And yeah, the configuration started and it's almost there. But there are some issues, here and there in the config maps, and we're trying to sort it out. I hope in 1 week or so that will be sorted out. But if we go to if you remember, this is my dashboard of the consumer side. I mean, like the PSNC connector. So here, for example, you see there are, okay, these are the contracts. Let's go to the browser. So as you see, we have now 331 assets, right? So there are many assets available here. But what is important is that, well, you can see where is it coming from, originator. The originator is telling you which is the connector that is making this resource or this asset available. So in this case, for example, most of these assets are coming from the AD4GD connector, which is the other one, which is this one that I show you here. This is the AD4GD connector. This is PSNC connectors. So most of them are coming from AD4GD. There are some examples coming from PSNC connector, but also now we have, for example, this new asset from the morning that was created by our colleagues of FAIRICUBE, EOS, the EOS hub. Yeah, so this is here. And now we can do actual negotiation and this. So we are able to do, okay, so negotiate, and then the negotiation is done. So I can go to the contracts, and then I can visualize the actual contract already established, because obviously in this case, the policies, as you know, they are really just an empty policy, but it's just for demo purposes. And then from here, I could transfer I showed you yesterday also to my local storage or to the MinIO, this shared data sync. If I need to provide some parameters or some path, whatever, this is possible as well. So there is actual, I was asking now, Stefan, what is the actual target URL to understand? Because if I do transfer, I get some not found. So 404 means not found. So I don't know yet what is exactly the target scenario here or target. So we are just making sure that this will be coming soon. But you can see there are a lot of now examples coming from FAIRICUBE, consumer, provider. So you can see here where is it coming from. And as I say also yesterday, we are now also able to show this additional metadata that we have provided in the form, for example, of a JSON, and this normally what we are expecting, and that was also what Joan was showing in the TAPIS when he was getting these resources from the connector. He was able to ingest, of course, because this is JSON and this is semantic annotation, semantic metadata. So he's able to use it and display it and work with it. This is more domain. In our case, it's more like data space metadata, let's call it, because this metadata, again, I believe that each data space can have its own metadata schema defined. Not necessarily, every single data space will have the same schema. That will be dependent on the data space. But in our case, for example, this metadata comes mostly from the GeoNetwork. that was also presented yesterday, right? So another of the components. So we use, which is basically based on DCAT, right? And DCAT is also one of the core models of the Green Deal information model. So everything is aligned with our, let's say, semantic interoperability approach. So yeah, so that's pretty much what we have at the moment. It's not perfect yet, but I hope that in the next week or 2 weeks, this will be sorted out and finalized. But it was a really quick job. So we really did this in like 3 weeks so far.